Maharaja Nachatramalaki. The story concerning this man is that he was of an English mother and an Indian father. He was born in 1848 in Dhaka, Bengal province. His family was extremely wealthy and owned a large estate just outside of Bombay. His father desired that he become a medical man and sent him to medical college at Oxford. But he was by nature a poet and philosopher, and so after receiving his final degree in medicine to please his father, he suddenly disappeared. The story is that he spent about 10 years traveling in the remotest regions of the world and studying as many of the religious and philosophical beliefs of man as he could lay his hands to. In 1915 he finally came back to his home in Bombay, where he died, confessing he had found no answer to life that could give him peace of mind, that all questions simply posed more questions, and that all answers were simply personal opinions that said nothing. He now says the only answer to life as a whole is to question nothing, just be, facing all situations with as much detachment as one can muster. Creation, continued. The Maharaja Nachatramalaki. When a vast section of the black void had been filled in with all manner and types of heavenly bodies, word was sent to the archangels of the lower etheric that their new plane of consciousness was ready to be experienced. A vast and mighty host of archangels were then initiated into a most holy order, which was to be a deeply secretive group calling themselves Yasu, which means believers in the holy illusion. As greatly advanced as were these angelic beings in mental awareness, they had not the wisdom and knowledge of the overlord state of consciousness, and therefore could not understand the method of meditation that would take them into the black void. So a great rite was held, and explanations were made with respect to the new worlds and the probable conditions to be found on them, and the possible changes that might be made as time went on, and also how to escape from these bodies back to their original state when and if existing conditions did not prove favorable. With these instructions given, the overlords caused a great sleep to fall upon the angelic host, saying unto them, "Let there be light. Awaken, O my brothers, from your profound world of inner consciousness. Let the light of the outer awareness now prevail upon you. And let this light be divided from the inner consciousness." When the high archangels entered the new mental state called the black void, they were not at all shocked or confused at the glorious sight that confronted them, for they were under the guiding control of the minds of the overlords, who, eons of time later in man's history, were referred to by certain occult schools as the group spirit that governed man's activity on the earth plane until he, man, had acquired sufficient earth experience to be given his freedom to work on his own initiative. Of the group spirit we will talk at greater length in later pages. Orders were given to the great angelic hosts to go and investigate the great fiery bodies that seemed to roar through the inky blackness of the void at appalling rates of speed. One of the first things to hold at attention of the high archangels was the strange fact that motion had taken on new properties. Not only did the substance of these flaming bodies seem to be something in themselves and entirely apart from them, but they seemed to move about quite independently of the other bodies around them, and when the archangels entered these flaming bodies they discovered their consciousness did not blend with the substances but remained quite separate from it, and still moved around it. The high archangels spent what would be the equivalent of many millions of years investigating these bodies as they went through their endless states of change. All conditions of change were duly recorded and reports sent back to the overlords, where, in the course of time, they have been handed back to man as he himself advanced and grew in brain and mind. As some of these flaming gaseous bodies became more or less solidified, the high archangels noted that the substances of which they were composed moved less and less violently. It seemed to them that motion was congealing, and they found it more and more difficult to handle the substance. At first they believed this peculiar condition was due to the substance being of a yet lighter matter than their own bodies. Finally they came to realize it was just the reverse, their own bodies were at fault. Whereupon the high archangels withdrew their consciousness from their new worlds and held council among themselves, with the overlords intervening occasionally, as to what best to do to overcome this new condition, for it was considered useless to go further with their investigation of these bodies unless some means was devised to make direct contact with it. That, then, was their desperate need, direct contact. Now, let us stop here for a moment and endeavor to explain what might appear to one not trained in metaphysics a strange thing, our use of the term bodies in regard to the high archangels. In all states of awareness of an individual, the impulse known as consciousness always has a body to travel in, and as for that, so must all things have a body to travel in or on, but, and this is very important to know, neither the consciousness of an individual nor a so-called thing need know or be at all aware of its body, or of possessing a body. A form or shape or body is merely a field of expanded conscious awareness, and these fields of awareness are best suited for the work or experiences that may lie ahead of the consciousness that built it or them. Mind builds and destroys according to its particular need of the moment, and it is not always what you call consciously aware of its action. Let us bring this thought down to your physical worlds for more clarity. Your heart beats and all your internal organs work night and day without conscious prompting. Your entire body is going through constant and rapid changes, without your conscious assistance. This is what is known as subconscious activity, but, believe me, subconscious is a misnomer, for the consciousness does know its every minute move, it merely does not impart its knowledge to the particular vehicle it is operating upon at the time. Force never says, I am going to move a body, but it moves the body and leaves that body to use the forces, energy for its particular needs, and a body that has been so acted upon may find endless implications from the manner alone by which the force moved it. The purpose of my telling you all this is not to leave you wandering around in the dark in regard to the consciousness and a body and their relations to one another. The overlord spoke to the assembly of high archangels, and said, "Oh, our brothers of the new light, the difficulty that you are now faced with lies not in your new world, but in yourselves, and henceforth, if you are to advance and grow in your new world, this you will find to be a truth well worth pursuing. Heretofore, while you have been in possession of what are known as forms or bodies, you have not been aware of them as being something apart or separate from yourself, but now, and due to the necessity of the occasion, we command you to be aware of these bodies." With that the overlords uttered a holy mantram in deep and resonant tones that caused the archangels to feel as though a great and beautiful and vibrant light had passed over them. "And now, before you depart again to your new worlds, we tell you this, the bodies you are now conscious of are good only for your present needs, the substances of which the new worlds are made are subject to rapid and endless change. These changes will not conform to you, so if you hope to live in harmony with this new world, you must conform to it and all its changes, otherwise you shall perish from it." The first physical bodies the archangels used or came with to the earth plane was enormous, ranging from 40 to 50 feet in height and of mighty strength, and they knew not of fear. But the earth was barren as yet of any kind of growth and was constantly being rocked and split asunder by devastating earth shocks and frightful winds of intense heat and cold. Now that their bodies were of the same vibratory rate as that of the earth, they needed substance of the same vibration to sustain it, and this could not be found anywhere, and in consequence of all this, they soon perished or gave up their physical bodies. But instead of entering back into the low etheric, and regaining their state as archangels, they entered a state of consciousness, which we shall call the low astral. These first experimenters of your world had had their earth experiences, and had failed to conform with the then existing conditions of the earth, the astral being the only open door of freedom for them from the intolerable conditions of the elements of the earth. Here they could stand by, as it were, and be quite aware of all that went on the earth, but could not physically enter into its activity, for some time to come. Then, for millions of years more, the earth was deluged and flooded from end to end with scalding rains, red rains in some parts of the earth and black rains, the kind which you seem to think phenomenal today. The why of them your present-day scientists almost answered when they said it was due to dust particles. But the rising of the dust was not of recent times, But long years before the floods came, there were cycles running into the thousands of years of utter dryness that split and powdered the rocky surface of the earth, and scorching winds of hundreds miles an hour swept the earth, carrying trillions of tons of rock dust thousands of miles out into space. After the Great Deluge there followed an almost equal period of continual sunshine in which the sun pulled almost all the surface water from the earth. The earth's atmosphere, being much more rarefied at that time, its surface matter gave less resistance to the pulling action of the sun, and in consequence trillions of tons of water particles were pulled thousands of miles out, beyond the Earth's atmosphere, where it ran into and was held by a vast cold band, where it rapidly formed a globe of ice around the Earth. On first thought, one would suppose such a condition would shut off the rays of the sun and cause the Earth to freeze, but the reverse was the case. It did soften the heat radiation of the sun, but such to come for the first time on the Earth, and if the fierce action of the sun's rays on the Earth's surface had continued, the coming plant life could not have survived its first Earth experience any better than the archangels or man. The great ice barrier also kept the savage winds that roared out of interstellar space from getting through to the Earth. The Earth's atmosphere became somewhat hot and the humidity was heavy and dense. The great winds that had swept vast quantities of Earth particles into the air to be treated by life-giving ultraviolet rays of the sun, had long been back on the Earth, brought by water particles, and though the sun had taken most of the water off the Earth's surface to form the ice barrier in the sky, it had left great lakes of it, so that when the ice barrier blocked off the great winds from the Earth, these lakes of water became practically motionless. Then great swarms of what your friend, the helper, referred to as etheric germ life, but which I shall call by a name you may better understand as vitic globules, settled on the nearly motionless surface of these lakes. These minute points of light are intelligent life forces sent out by the overlords from the high etheric, and their work was to create or duplicate the scenic beauty of the low etheric, so that when man or the high archangels made their second attempt to colonize the earths they would feel more at home. These little creatures I sometimes like to refer to as etheric eggs, for as they came to rest on the surface of the waters, they went to work on the then existing chemicals or dead matter on the water, and formed what you call a scum on the surface, thus forming a sufficiently strong physical structure for the next step, which was accomplished by the slow evaporation of water. As the waters were absorbed into the humid air, great quantities of this surface scum were left on dry land, where it started to turn acid and ferment very rapidly. All changes in matter are brought about by the force of the cosmic mind playing upon what you call raw or dead forces called chemicals, or, in other words, a positive force working in a negative field, rearranging the electronic fields of the raw matter so as to form a variety of chemical compositions. The purpose of creating a vast variety of chemical compositions was to form a positive-negative fields that consisted of an endless variety of motion or different rates of vibration. Some of these rates of vibration differed from one another by infinitesimal fractions, and others were of such great speeds they ran out of the field of what you call solids and entered the field you call liquids and gases. Of course, great portions of the vibrations called liquids and gases had slowed down eons before and formed solids. That is, their rates of vibration had slowed down to the point that would be best suited for its coming inhabitants. Then another change was made in the positive-negative fields of matter. The vitic globules or pinpoints of energy all carry their own particular rate of vibratory motion to their own in order to enter into it and endow it with their life energy. The beginning of this act of impregnating of matter with life energy is not a difficult one for these little beings. In fact, the act is quite a mechanical one, for they are automatically attracted to the chemicals best suited to their purpose by the magnetic genetic field of attraction of that chemical. The affinity that one kind of chemical has for a particular life force is brought about by the rate of motion of the electronic field of the atoms natural to that particular chemical. If it is of a higher rate than the magnetic field of the life force approaching it, it will automatically reject or repulse it, but if it is a mere fraction lower, the life force will rush into it at a terrific rate of speed. This blending of the spiritual forces with the chemical atom causes great excitation, exhilarating the chemical atom and expanding its magnetic field, causing it to pull towards itself all other chemical atoms in harmony with it and the characteristics of shape and form imbued in the particular life force, and rejecting all which is not. It continues this activity until it forms a physical seed or egg. In mystical terms, we may refer to the seed or egg as a subjective thought or idea, awaiting the proper moment to become an objective manifestation called out of the invisible into the visible, by the commanding rays of the sun, which is the light of wisdom in your chemical world to all plant life and in some measure to man also. As long as the manifestation idea lives in harmony with the other ideas around it, and conforms to the force that brought it into the physical world, it will thrive and grow strong, but the moment it ceases to do so, it will in that moment perish, or lose its physical vehicle and return to the world of the subjective. This, however, does not mean that it will lose its life force. The life force can never be lost, even though the earth pass away and all physical matter throughout the length and breadth of space go with it, for none of it rightfully belongs to life force as an eternal something, but is merely a phase of it, one of the countless forms of its self-expression. Many schools of the occult show their lack of even good common sense when they openly state that they know the true number of years that makes a round or cycle of the birth and death of either man or the world of matter he lives in, or where the true essence of man originated. Even the greatest adept or avatar on earth cannot vouchsafe this information, for once man attains that great advanced state of mind he would not under any circumstances allow this knowledge to pass his lips so that it would fall into a channel that would take it back to the ears of the untrained. All that you shall ever read or hear in regard to man and the so-called mystic side of life, while very beautiful and extremely helpful towards placing you on your secret path, is by no means whatsoever the secret laws of life. Believe me, my friends, these laws cannot and never shall be given out. Why? The answer is simple: you, yourself, as an individual must seek them. They are yours, they belong exclusively to you. Let not this news make you disheartened, for I assure you that time is not, but in the course of that which is not, you shall know all the great and glorious truth.